Jimmy kind of coming on board right out of high school, dedicating his life, literally his life, to bourbon. Like Jimmy, this September, he will be at Wild Turkey 70 years.
Wow.
And welcome everyone to episode 158 of Mashup, the best bourbon conversation you're in here all week long. We're your hosts, Anthony, Kenny, and Steven. Hello, Kenny.
What up, Steven? How you doing, buddy?
Good, you?
Doing good. It's a peaceful night since Anthony is out of town.
Much quieter, no giggles.
That's right. We can be more serious. And No, I miss him, though.
Well, we have someone in his place tonight.
Yeah, we have somebody that I would probably put in his place all the time. No, I'm kidding, Anthony. I love you, buddy.
But seriously.
So we are. Tonight we're kind of blessed, man. We have David Jennings, the Rare Bird 101 in town.
Woo!
What's up, David?
How's it going, guys?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
All righty.
Yeah, so last week's episode, we did the Raconteur Rye. Raconteur. Did you listen, David?
Raconteur Rye.
Did you listen to it? I actually played that little thing
I
off
heard
of
it.
But so we thought we'd follow up this week. David's in town. He had a event tonight, so he'll talk about it in a little bit at Wild Turkey. So we were lucky enough to snatch him up after that event. Literally went to his hotel and snatched him up. Didn't have to blindfold him or anything, but we did snatch him up. Thought it'd be a great time to have him on tonight. Very interesting guy with an amazing tie to the bourbon industry.
Thank you.
What we're doing right now is this will be a little bit different episode than normal. We're not going to do your normal typical pass try by. It's more of a chill hangout episode. So right now we did have some pours in front of us. We talked before about the Cavalon pick. So we actually poured David a little bit of this Darsh's Cavalon pick that's out of this world. And I poured David a couple blinds over there in front of him as well. So we're going to be sipping a little bit, talking a little bit. Just more of a hangout tonight.
Sweet. This Cavalon's impressive. Thick, layered, complex, robust. Just everything you would want in a whiskey, honestly.
Yeah, because I knew when you're in town before, I got you that Cavalon Soloist.
Right.
Yep. We had down there, and this is just even next level above that.
Yep. I'd say it's 2 levels above that.
Yeah, it's so that one it's crazy. I don't know if we talked about it here or not before. But that was a pick they did in 2018 up in Michigan. And when they got their bottles, they only got about half of the bottles. It was like 512, I think, or 498 in the big batch. Mm-hmm. They only got about half of them. Like, where are their bottles at? And Cavalon would not respond to them. They really wouldn't. But if you look on the bottle, it was bottled in 2014, even though it was on a 2018 pick. So what it was, and if you look back in 2014, the Cavalon, the S06s, that particular run, they won like Whiskey of the Year. They scored like 99 out of 100. That basically was probably set aside for executives, for high-end people, for people at the distillery, at the whatever. Shouldn't have been part of that program at all. Somehow 4 years later, it was in their pick program accidentally. So they did get half of the barrels or half the bottles in that batch, but it's out of this world. It's truly out of this world.
It's sick.
Yeah. So good.
Super impressive.
So can you talk about what you came into town for? Okay,
so many of you listening probably are aware that Wild Turkey's visitor center has been closed for a few years now.
Right.
For renovations, and they've recently reopened it, and this was kind of like grand opening celebration of that reopening of the visitor center. And we did a tour of the distillery. We did a tasting in Rickhouse A, and then we went back to the visitor center, and Eddie walked us through all the new improvements and stuff of the visitor center. And then we had a dinner, and we had a tasting, which included some of your standard expressions. It included some cocktails, but then it also included the new Master's Keep, the Triumph. Nice. So really stoked to try that, and I'll just say that I was not disappointed at all in the new Master's Keep.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it's probably, it's hard to say because I was in the moment there with Eddie and Bruce.
Right.
But like we're talking like top 3. It was killer.
That's awesome.
Now,
a lot of listeners might not know though. So the new Triumph is a what? A lot of listeners might not know.
A 10-year-old rye whiskey.
There we go.
And the proof escapes me. I want to say it's like 105 or something like that. It's not barrel strength, but it's above 100 proof. And it was just fantastic. Like, I was expecting that Cornerstone profile, and it was much sweeter, much richer. It was more layered. It was very honey forward.
Yeah.
There was a lot of like caramel apple.
That's awesome.
Wow.
You still had that citrus spice, and you had some of that, like, what you would find normally in a turkey rye spice wise, but it was a lot more rounded. It was just a different experience than your typical like 101 rye, rare breed rye, cornerstone. It was its own thing. And very, very happy. I'm a buyer at retail all day.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the best Master's Keeps they've ever made.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, because I
hands on it.
I really love that 17-year bottled and bond a lot. And then a few of them I've liked in between, but a few have been kind of misses for me.
Yep.
So this one sounds like it might be the home run again.
Yeah, I mean, my top 3 to date, and I can't really rate the Triumph until I have like a bottle to really spend time with at home, but
Yeah.
I was super impressed. But prior to today, my top 3 consisted of the Bottled and Bond, the Revival, and then Unforgotten, which is the Burai.
Yeah.
Revival and Bottled and Bond would kind of flip-flop
forth.
on first
I think
and second
Alves
place.
loves the Revival.
Yeah. They kind of flip-flop on first place, but the Unforgotten is definitely third. Decades is probably fourth. And then after that, it kind of depends on my mood. But this Triumph, I could easily see it edging into the top 3.
So I like Cornerstone so much, so this one's got me super hyper then. That's awesome.
I think it's better than Cornerstone, no
Yeah.
doubt. No doubt.
Well, thank you very much. Graciously invited me to some picks recently. But last time we were there, we picked a Wild Turkey Rye
Yep.
and that Wild Turkey Bourbon.
Yep.
That barrel of rye by the front of the rick house there that
Yeah.
he lets people sample out of,
Yep.
that was 9 years old.
8 years old.
Is it 8?
It's 8, yeah.
Okay. Well, I went and I grabbed a little bigger sample than what I probably should have.
Bruce told the whole group about this tonight.
Yeah. So, but I went and had it hydrometered,
Yep.
and it was 101.
Yep.
So that Triumph, if it's 105, even though they're saying not barrel proof, it's probably not far off from barrel proof.
Probably not.
Because that was 101, man.
I mean, if you think about it, more often than not, rye does not proof as high as bourbon.
Yeah.
Because corn's going to give you more ethanol typically. Yeah. But 105 is, if that is the proof, I'd have to look it up. Probably pretty close. The single barrel ryes that Wild Turkey does are bottled at 104, and they sip close to a barrel proof whiskey. So it wouldn't surprise me. But even if it's not barrel proof, does that really matter? I mean, think of all the dusty Wild Turkeys that are 101 proof. That aren't necessarily barrel proof. Does anybody complain about that?
So the pick you invited me on was also the very first tour they've done. We kind of did like a tour on the side.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're supposed to say it on air or not tonight.
No, you can say it, yeah.
But we did a tour, and I did not know this. I didn't realize that their White Dog also came off the still that much lower proof than other people. I actually knew they have a lower entry proof into the barrel.
Right.
I didn't realize that they also had lower proof off the still.
I think it comes off the still at like 125, and then it goes into the barrel at 115.
Yeah, but that's way lower than most other people, man. So that's why, you can have a 101 proof turkey and still taste full flavor, full boldness.
Yeah, I mean, back
richness.
when you get into the dusty era, they went into the barrel at 107.
Yeah.
So 101 is...
Yeah, the Wild Turkey Master Keep 17, that's not the Bottled and Bond.
Right.
That was the last, wasn't that one of the last ones, or was was the Russell's...
Even the I guess you'd have to look at the age statement. I mean, the 107 barrel entry proof stopped in 2004.
Okay.
So you basically have to look at a release and then
do the
age,
math and do the
correct.
Do
the math. So I mean, if you look at stuff like Russell's Reserve 2003, that's old entry proof.
Yeah.
2002 old entry proof.
Yeah.
So you'd have to look at the age. But it makes a difference. I think that's one of the contributing factors to the dusty turkey flavor, although I don't think that's the only factor. So a lot of people, they put a lot of weight in that barrel entry proof, and not that they're wrong. I just don't think that is what, when people try to nail down what is the dusty turkey profile, I don't think you can just pin it on one thing.
Right.
There's a lot of factors into why that's different.
Yeah.
So David, you had started your blog.
Yep.
That Rare Bird. Back in 2016?
That's right.
So can you take us from there until you released your book until 2020, kind of that journey?
Okay. So 2016 was... So I got into whiskey around 2013.
Yeah.
And it was more by chance than anything else. It wasn't like...
That's when you got in?
That's when I got in.
Oh, wow.
So I was at my brother-in-law's house. We were doing trick-or-treat.
Remember your first drink?
Well, I mean, I'd had bourbon.
Okay, but
I'm
not
47.
into whiskey.
I'm 47, so I had bourbon all through college.
Okay.
It was usually Jack and Coke or Gin and
Right,
Coke,
right.
Crown and Coke, whatever. So we were, I was at his house. We were going to go trick or treat with the kids. It was cold for some reason that night, which isn't typical of, the weather there in Georgia and South Carolina. But it was cold. And he was like, hey, man, you want a whiskey? And I'm thinking it'll go into like a Coke or a ginger ale or something like that. And he puts like a Crown Royal on the rocks in like a rocks glass. And I'd never really drank whiskey like that before. It was always either a shot or it was a mixed drink or a cocktail. That was like what I knew whiskey as. And after trying that, I was like, damn, that's really good. So literally the next day, I went to the liquor store and I'm like, I'm going to find the best whiskey in the world.
There you go, man.
And I bought like, some expensive Crown Royal,
That's
like,
awesome.
My little whiskey mind at the time thought that was the shit,
Right.
So I take that home, I try it, I drink it in Coke, ginger ale, try it on rocks. Just like I start getting into the hobby. I start buying magazines, buying books, going and doing Google searches, finding blogs, and then all of these different types of media, whether it's a magazine or a book or a blog, they're all leading me in different directions. This is the best whiskey. This is the best whiskey, So I go to the liquor store again. I try a different Scotch, or I try an Irish, or I eventually kind of figure out that bourbon is kind of like my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And get to the point where I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to start writing some reviews because I was reading Reddit's Our Bourbon forum a good bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm going to dip my toes in the pool and write a review. So I did a review of a Smooth Ambler Old Scout. It was like the 10-year, the standard, 10. It wasn't a barrel pick or anything. And that was my very first review. And I enjoyed it. I was like, this is really fun. Like, I didn't feel like anybody was like shaming me or telling me that like I was doing it wrong. Like, I felt like, people were receptive. They commented. Not everyone agreed, but I felt like I was getting some like feedback. So I'm like, I'll do another review.
Some good back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth. And it was fun. It was fun to like talk about these things with people. And it was like we were doing this thing together. It wasn't like I was jumping in and people were shaming me or like telling you're doing it all wrong. It was kind of like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? You need to try this. You need to try that. And so I was very open-minded, trying new things. It was a lot of fun early on. And at some point, I want to say it was around 2014, that I had been avoiding wild turkey for a long time because in college, wild turkey was like the shooter. That was like what you got wasted on. You had bad nights,
Everything was 101.
Right.
Yeah.
So I left that alone. Well, one day checking out the liquor store, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy like a little 375 of 101 and just review it for Reddit for fun. It's going to be crap whiskey. It's going to be bottom shelf stuff, right? And when I got home and I poured it, and I was like, damn, if this isn't better than like almost all the other stuff I've tried. And I'm like, surely I'm mistaken here. Something's not right. Maybe this is just some special batch. And I'm just, and I was mesmerized by how good it was. And so I posted on Reddit about how I loved Wild Turkey 101. And this is like, again, 2014-ish, around then. And somebody reached out to me and said, hey, have you ever had Dusty Wild Turkey? And I was like, no, not in the sense that you think it. Like, I probably shot it back in college, but I never like sat and enjoyed Dusty Turkey. So he's like, I'm going to send you some samples. I want you to give me some feedback. He sent me a Cheesy Gold foil from 92 and 81 101.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the first thing I opened was that 81 101 proof.
Caramel bomb.
Dude, it changed. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had picked my kids up from daycare. I got them home. I checked the mail, found the sample box. I got my kids dinner. I got them squared away in the kitchen.
Busy.
And I'm like, now I'm going to try. So I poured it, and I'm like, I'm just going to nose it. I'm just going to nose it, because I still on kid duty here, right? And I nosed it, and I was like, what the hell is this? And I'm like, okay, I got to taste it now. And I tasted it. I was just like, whatever this is like what I want to die with. This is what I want to die with. And I'm like, I am going to find this in a bottle now. Yeah. Funny thing is, you can't find that in a bottle now. I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I thought you could just go find this, right? You can't. But the trade-off was, in my quest to find that in a bottle, I went and explored the Wild Turkey catalog. I bought every Wild Turkey I could find at my local liquor stores. Yeah. All of them.
At once?
Not at once, but spread over a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, like, not in short time.
Yeah.
And I even drove around, went to like cities 20, 30 minutes away. And at that time, 2014-ish, 2015-ish, so you could still find some pretty good stuff hidden on, like, easy to find early 2000s, 101, easy to find the original 101, the Russell's 10 and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
All that stuff was still kind of, you could find it.
Those Russell's 10s back then? Wow.
The squat ones, the brown label, 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
You could find those. The Wild Turkey Russell's Reserve, 10-year wasn't like something you could easily find. But you could find these things.
Like the old tear label ones.
And you could find, well, I'm talking about before that, the brown label.
Oh, the brown for label. That? Oh, wow. Yeah.
The ones that were 20.
Man,
the
it's
2005,
wild
2006.
What just sat on the shelf. Isn't it wild? What just sat on the shelf for so many years.
And you could find those for $30.
Yeah.
No problem. And then you could find the tear ones all over. The tear ones were like kind of the normal.
That was the new thing.
That was kind of the normal. The red label didn't kick in until 2015.
Yeah.
So you could find the tear ones easy. But I tried the whole catalog, and I found something I liked about all of them. Now, I mean, of course, like, the 81 proof bourbon, the 81 proof rye, they're not going to like blow you away, but they were fine as mixers. I felt like nothing that Wild Turkey made
was bad
as far as straight whiskey goes was bad.
Yeah,
it was all. And then I started researching the brand, the history, learning about the Russell family, and it really just pulled me in because at the time, if you rewind and you think about 2014, that kind of time, like Wild Turkey was not popular. It was like everybody was chasing the old Stitzel stuff. Everybody was wanting the revival of Weller and all this. Like everybody wanted the Buffalo Trace line. Mm-hmm. Nobody was chasing turkey. The only people chasing turkey were the people that knew. And they were chasing Dusty Turkey for the most.
I wish Anthony was here because I'm sure he was into Buffalo Trace back then too, like he is now, the Tater.
Yeah, I mean, people were avoiding it because they were chasing what was popular and what was mainstream. And I am not knocking Buffalo Trace at all.
No, it's a good product.
Makes great whiskey, no doubt.
Yeah, Ralph, I'm not knocking Buffalo Trace. I needed to bring up Buffalo Trace a little bit later. Ralph messaged me. He was like, "We're talking bad about Buffalo Trace."
But there's a lot of Buffalo Trace whiskey that's fantastic, but it kind of overloved.
Yeah.
Like people were just going nuts over it.
Yeah.
And especially the labels that Buffalo Trace owned, but the Dusty versions, like the Stitzel versions, so people were going like nuts over that. Like the old Seagram's Eagle Rare and all that, and those still fetch high prices. Whereas I was just focused on turkey. Like when I really got serious about turkey, I could find 101.8s from the 80s and 90s anywhere between 100 and 200. So 125, 150, 175 was a real common price for 101.8s. Cheesy Gold I could find for $225, $250.
Oh my gosh, dude!
All day.
That's crazy.
All day.
That's nuts.
Donuts were $400, and that was a hefty purchase.
I'll give you $450 right now.
But I mean, that's how underappreciated it was at the time. At the time, it did not take it long for people to realize that holy shit, this is like, I'm chasing all this Stitzel stuff, and turkey's got
just fire sitting there.
Yeah.
Fire.
And it did not take long for people to go and start turn and chase that. Now, people, again, this was nothing new. There were plenty of people in the know before me that knew this and were buying up that turkey. So this is not some new discovery on my part.
They were keeping it a secret. And you were publishing it.
Yeah, I was publishing it.
It's your fault.
It's my fault. But
awesome.
It was a very, very fun time because the chances of finding something cool back then were pretty good. Pretty good. I mean, you would have days where you wouldn't find anything, but you go to the right small town, and it wasn't hard to find a bunch of Austin Nickel color label, from the 2000s 101.
That's awesome.
Like you could find rows and rows of like handles, 750s, 375s all day. It was not hard.
Yeah.
Just a different time. And see, that was after everybody had cleared out all the old,
a lot of the dusty, like
stuff.
The true dusty dusties. What they're chasing after.
Correct. So it was nice to kind of have that as a treat because it was still the underdog. And I think that's a lot of what appealed to me about Wild Turkey is that not only did I love the profile of the modern turkey at the time and the story of the Russell family. I liked that it was kind of the underdog at the time because, like not a lot of people were buying turkey. Not a lot of people were interested in it.
Yeah.
So it was a fun topic because it wasn't a topic that had been overdone. Like everybody had done like the Poor Man's Pappy and the Weller 12s and the Elmer T. Lee articles. Like, I mean, those things were like way overdone. So it was nice to have something where people were writing about a brand that most people, and I say most people, I mean general consumers, were looking at as like a bottom shelf brand, and turkey was far from that. But in my mind and a lot of other people's minds, when we first started paying attention to it, it was that type of whiskey. You're like thinking, okay, this is bottom shelf. This is stuff I shoot before a party. You didn't realize that, like, how good it really was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'm very new to bourbon. I mean, I literally took my first sip in 2020. So that's something I discovered pretty quickly is it's one mash bill, one yeast strain, and holy crap, what do they make? It's insane how good the stuff is.
It really is. They don't do anything but that.
Yeah.
Same entry proof. They have changed it, but as far as what's going in now, not saying that I don't want to get in trouble, but I'm not saying that there haven't been some experiments lately.
Yeah.
But for the most, going in at 115. And
don't say anything gets you in trouble.
They're always playing around with stuff.
So you had all the experience with all this turkey products. So when did like the Russell's brand kind of embrace you?
And was it Campari? Was it the Russells? How did that whole thing work out? How did that happen?
It was very organic. It wasn't forced. It wasn't an invitation formally. If I had to kind of pin it down, there's two blog posts there's one blog post that I wrote, and there's a blog post that someone else wrote that kind of set the whole thing off. The first was Aaron Goldfarb did a piece about Dusty Turkey for Punch Drink, the blog Punch Drink, and he quoted me in it. And in that article, he also linked to my blog. So I got a lot of traffic out of that because people were curious about Dusty Turkey.
Yeah.
And they were clicking on that link, and it took them to my blog. The other blog post was something that I wrote called the Golden Age of Wild Turkey and Why You Should Be Paying Attention. That was the name of the article. Yeah. And it was in 2017, and it was about Jimmy and Eddie and Bruce kind of coming together to kind of put a new spin on wild turkey. And it was the piece that I basically intended to basically say that whatever you think about wild turkey, you're wrong, that it's much greater than you imagine. And I haven't read that piece in a long time, and I probably should go back and read it. But it was basically me walking through the different ages. And when I say ages, I mean eras. Eras of wild turkey. And kind of what made it what it is now. And I think that those two pieces, and I say that piece was a big deal because that was the first piece that Campari reached out to me and said, hey, can we promote this on Twitter or on social media?
That's awesome.
And I was like, sure. And they asked if I'd change a couple things, and they weren't opinionated things. They were just facts. Like in the piece I talked about Bruce living in Texas, and they said he was moving back, so they wanted me to kind of mention that. So I mentioned that. They asked me for a few edits, but they weren't edits of my opinion. Yeah. It was just basically to kind of get the record straight kind of thing. So they sent me a few things to change, and I did that, and then they promoted it, and that got some more attention to the blog. And then it kind of took off from there to the point where it really became almost like a second job for me. Like what started as like something I did at night when the kids were asleep and I was just having fun became more like, wow, I guess this is like I'm expected to write something. So I started doing like weekly, and I had this really rigid schedule for a long time where like at first I started off where I would do a blog post every 4 days. And that was easy to do when my kids were real little. As they got older and got involved in activities sports. And so that 4 days was unrealistic, and it turned into every week. And then it turned into every week and a half or so. And now it's more like when I have time to sit down and write, I will. Now, I do write regularly for Patreon because I feel like I have this support financially and that those people deserve to have content. And so I make sure that I try to kind of keep that going on Patreon more so than I do the blog. But the blog, I do try to get, I'd say, at least 2 to 4 posts in a month now. But I spend a lot of my time on Patreon and my Patreon Discord. Yeah.
Well, your website's one of the first ones that I kind of started going to when I was getting into bourbon. It was kind of funny because I was like, because my buddy Cameron loves wild turkey, big into wild turkey stuff, and he's the one that turned me on to you. And then it's so funny. And then Alves, I was very fortunate to meet him in my bourbon infancy. And so we're talking about Rare Bird, and he's like, he's like, I know him. I'm like, oh, do you really know him? And then he looked at me like I was dumb, and because y'all are like friends, close friends. I was like, oh my gosh, you know David, you know Rare Bird. It was so funny.
Ryan's a good dude.
That's my man, dude.
It's funny. Like I can't even really remember like specifically how Ryan and I met.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it was like just online chatting back and forth.
Right.
But like we clicked instantly.
Yeah.
And my first on-site barrel pick, he was there.
Yeah.
And we picked 3 barrels that day. And the best one of the bunch, we had kind of predetermined before we even went into the tasting that would be dedicated to his dad, because his dad had recently passed away. And we were going to make that a special, because he said his dad had always wanted to do like his own barrel pick, you know. And so we did a Promise to Mr. Porkchop was our first, on-site barrel pick
awesome.
there. We did Russell the Muscle that same day, which was a tribute to Jimmy and Eddie's 101, their combined tenure being 101 years.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And then we did another one called Swan Song. It was originally called the Truck Barrel. What happened was we were kind of done for the day. We had done our picks. We'd picked 2 CNFs, the Promise to Mr. Porkchop and Russell the Muscle were killer. And we're in there kind of wrapping up the pick, and a lady who worked at Wild Turkey walked in, and she kind of said something to Eddie, and I called Eddie going, only 1 barrel? And she was like, yeah, that's all it was. What? That's all it was. And he was like, what? So we go outside, and there's a tractor trailer that's backed up to warehouse A, Tyrone A, and there is literally 1 barrel.
On the whole truck.
On the whole truck from Camp Nelson. And I said, Eddie, we got her. We got her.
Yeah.
And the store manager, his name was Adam Howard, who works for the distributor now. He was like, we got to do this.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, Eddie. And he's like, you're not going to make me get up in that truck and tap that barrel, are you? I'm like, unfortunately, I am.
That's awesome.
And he played right along with it. He got up in the bed of the trailer and rolled the barrel over and popped the bung, and we all tasted the barrel out of the tractor trailer.
On the truck.
On the truck.
Wow.
And, it wasn't the best thing we had tasted all that day.
But something you'll remember.
It was Camp Nelson A, and the others were Camp Nelson F, which I have a tendency to lean F over A.
That's where I've been.
But these were 19As, which if you go back now and taste them, you're like, these are great. You know?
Right.
But at the time, they just didn't hold up to the Fs more often than not. And Adam's like, we kind of took a walk, and he's like, I got to have this barrel. And I'm like, he's like, this just has a story to it. This is a barrel I want. Turns out that I didn't know this, but he was quitting his job, and that was going to be his like swan song. That's why we named it Swan Song. So he wanted like a barrel to kind of go out on, to kind of be like his last barrel pick. And I'm glad he did, because when I go back and taste it now, it's amazing.
Yeah.
At the time, the quality barrels were just banger after banger, because those Fs, the CNFs and CNAs were just killer. But I'm glad we picked it. But that's how Swan Song came to be. It was originally the truck barrel and turned into Swan Song. So great
That's
story.
awesome.
I got pics to prove it.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, if you buy my book Wild Turkey Musings, in there's a picture of the truck barrel. It's it's in the tractor trailer just by itself, just sitting there.
That is awesome.
It is cool.
Yeah, you had a book you did in 2020 and 2023. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So the first one was American Spirit. I wrote that the research was done from 2018, 2019. I wrote it mostly in 2019, a little bit in 2020. I had no intention on writing a book. I was perfectly content writing a blog. My wife was like, you should write a book. And I was like, I am not a book author. I've never been an author. This is not something like I'm really interested in. She's like, but you write every day. You're writing for your blog. What's the difference in writing for a book? In my head, they seemed like completely different things. But I got to thinking about it, I'm like, they really aren't that much different. I mean, you're just sitting there writing, you know? So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to write a little bit at a time, and we'll see where it goes. The thing was, my kids were little at the time, so they would go to bed earlier than they do now.
Yeah.
So I'd put them to bed, and I would spend the rest of my waking hours before I had to go get some sleep for work the next day, working on the book.
Drinking coffee.
Actually, I would drink
Not yet.
whiskey.
Not-
But what I would do is I would drink what I found was best. I always have a little cup of coffee, but then I would drink lower proof whiskey to write.
Decaf whiskey.
Yeah. So like Russell's 10 at 90 proof, or, Long Branch, or, whatever it was, to kind of like, and don't hate me, but I went on an Ardbeg kick for a while there too. I was drinking Ardbeg 10 a good bit. Yeah. I found that, like, for some reason, I don't know why this is, but Ardbeg 10 made for good writing whiskey. It was just I could have a sip, and that sip would linger for so long, because, you've got that sweet, smoky, peaty taste. So I could take a sip, and that sip might last 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Because, you're chewing on that flavor, and you're just zoned in. You're forgetting that you're missing a flavor. Yeah. Whereas, like, bourbon is so sweet typically you take a sip and you want to take another sip and you want to take another sip. Whereas like something like Ardbeg 10 is something you kind of savor a little bit longer. So I found that like Scotch tended to be a little bit more of a writing whiskey. As much of a turkey guy as I am, I could pace that out. So a lot of American Spirit was written with lower proof turkey and Ardbeg, believe it or not. And so I finished that manuscript. I thought about shopping it around to some traditional publishers. I had one well-known whiskey writer tell me that he didn't think anybody would be interested in it because it was just all dedicated to one brand, and he didn't see, and he's probably right. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Like I thought about shopping it around, and the whole time, I've got a full-time job, I've got family and all that. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to self-publish this thing. I don't care. The whole point was just to get the information out to people. And right about that time, like I was like, you know what? I'll just do a Kickstarter. If I can raise like $5,000 or $10,000 or something, just enough to print it and get it out there, And I raised more than I thought I would, enough to where I was able to hire Victor Sizemore, who's a photographer who works for a good many bourbon brands in Kentucky, to take photographs for the book. And about that same time, I had someone from a publishing company reach out to me, and her father, and if I recall correctly, her grandfather both liked wild turkey. And so project kind of caught her eye. And she was like, I think this would be an awesome book. And she was like, I want to bring you in and talk. Yeah. So I went with what they call a hybrid publisher. So it's kind of like a self-publishing. You put the money up front, but then they have the same network and distribution connections that a traditional publisher has. So you kind of get the risk is on you. Yeah. But you still get out there, okay? So I took that Kickstarter campaign and turned it into what became American Spirit, the book. And I just simply repeated that process a couple years later with Wild Turkey Musings, which was my second book, which is more of a celebration of the first 5 years of my blog. It was more of a kind of a hats off to my fans, the people that had followed me for so long. So I made sure that in the section of the book where I thank everyone, for basically making that book happen, I have a list of all my Patreon supporters, my Kickstarter supporters, and, I kind of made sure that it put the spotlight on the people that made all this happen.
That's awesome. Well, dude, I do have a couple of blinds in front of you. So if you want to, you can sip on those a little bit, see what you think, and talk to you a little bit. Like for me, a lot of what I've been kind of focusing on with this, with like I said, I'm a very short bourbon journey, is kind of like making memories. And it seems like that's what you talk a lot about, just is making the memories. Yeah. Remember when I first got into whiskey, I watched the documentary Neat and just hearing Freddie, talk about the different things. And I ended up watching, literally I watched it first night I watched it 3 times that night. Like I started over and played it, just I would catch different things on each one. And it's made me start opening better bottles, different bottles, and just sharing and want to share and want to just make quote unquote memories, Yeah. And so it's kind of like you're on that truck store that wasn't maybe the best whiskey that day, but that story, it's there and it sticks out, and there it is,
Yeah. I remember when Neat came out, I was already into bourbon at the time. I enjoyed it. There were sections of it that I enjoyed more than others, but I thought that it was a very good way to introduce bourbon to non-bourbon drinkers.
I was a newbie then. Yeah. I was a total newbie when I watched that.
Yeah, and they did a really good job with that production in pulling people in. I don't know if it necessarily holds up now. Like I think if you watched it now, they would need to make a new version of it. Right. Because some of the things that took place in that aren't exactly the way that things are now. Yeah. Things have evolved tremendously just in the last 5 years, So if anyone's listening and they're a movie producer, I would recommend starting a new bourbon movie. You could probably do something cooler.
That might be you, bro.
No, I am definitely
you and not. Victor, man. Let's do it. Vic, and Victor.
I'm no videographer.
Hey, what about Caroline's boyfriend?
Oh no, yeah. Now he can do,
and you with you though.
You can ride it and he can shoot it.
Yeah, there we go.
You don't put me in front of the camera, but I mean behind the camera, I'll be more than happy to contribute.
There we go.
But it's interesting. Like I had a great conversation tonight. I spent a lot of time with Peggy No Stevens, and we were just talking about where bourbon is at now. And like she's been in this industry for a long time. She worked for Brown-Forman. Was I think the first female master taster, if I'm correct about that. I could be wrong, but.
That's cool, though. This is a facts optional podcast. We are very adamant about that.
Fairly sure she was the first female master taster in bourbon. Even if not, she's super experienced, super knowledgeable, and it was really interesting to have this conversation with her about not only where bourbon has been, but where it's at now and then where it's going.
Where it's going.
And we have come leaps and bounds. Like, she specifically talked about the 80s and how dismal it was. Like, the 80s
they were bankrupt. That's why all these companies had to buy all of our Kentucky bourbon distilleries.
It was all about survival.
Yeah.
It was survival. And to see the things that they were doing to innovate, to try to just at least keep people interested in buying the whiskey, it really took until the 90s. They were exporting things. It was like, it wasn't an overnight success. It wasn't like they pulled out just in time. It was like this slow, arduous process of just continuing on. And as she put it, hitting the road, Jimmy, Booker, Parker, Elmer, these old school guys going in front of a group of people and telling them, hey, there's more to bourbon than what you think there is. And it was a slow thing. It wasn't an instant thing. Now it seems like we see a lot of instant successes. Yeah. Somebody will come out with a batch or something special, and they'll throw it up online, and it'll sell out in like 2 hours or an hour or a few minutes, right? You wouldn't have seen that back then. You know? You had to push, and educate. It wasn't so much a sales pitch as it was a genuine appeal to consumers that, like, we have a quality product and you're not paying us attention. Yeah. And I think if you spend a few minutes and pay us attention, you'll see that this is a super high quality product. And Jimmy and Booker and Parker and Elmer, they were right. And there was something legitimately there. And now we know it. And these dusty whiskeys command a high premium on secondary markets, but at the time, people wouldn't even pay retail for them. Like, it wasn't even worth it to them. So it was a very interesting conversation tonight. And another thing that came up, going all over the place here, but there's all this talk about when is the bubble going to burst. That conversation has taken place before I even got into bourbon. Yeah. Like, when I got into bourbon around 2013, people were already talking about that. The bourbon boom's going to bust. It's a bubble. It's just like the tulip craze, couple hundred years ago, blah, blah, blah. Next year, it's all going to die. I've heard that year after year after year. Now, are we plateauing? It seems like it. It seems like production has kind of gotten to the point where it's meeting demand now. So I think that things are slowing down. But we're still seeing allocated whiskey. I mean, if bourbon wasn't popular, why can't I find Pappy on the shelf?
Right.
Why can't I find Weller on the shelf? Why can't I find Blanton's on the shelf? Now, some places you do see Blanton's every once in a while. But if the bourbon boom was truly dying, you would find that stuff on the shelf everywhere.
It would be there.
It would be there. Yeah. And it's not. So I think it's false to say that, the bourbon thing's about to bust. I do think we're going to plateau. But if you look at the success that bourbon's had in the last 10 years, and you compare it to the 10 years before it, completely different story.
Yeah.
Completely different. Bourbon is doing very well. It does probably need to get to a point where it kind of regulates and settles in and corrects itself to a market.
Well, I think COVID really amped it and ramped it up faster than it should have.
Right.
So the correction you're seeing now, I think, is not meaning that it's dead and it's over, but the correction now is, hey, COVID shouldn't have taken it to this place initially.
Good point.
Anyway, because with the COVID, you have people, stimulus money, crypto boomed then.
Yep.
People were
Time
not
at
taking
home.
People were literally quarantining. They weren't taking vacations, so they had a vacation budget to spend, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm not saying, so it is definitely down some right now, slower market, but I think it's just correcting from the COVID boom that really shouldn't have probably taken it there to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that, and even with myself, I found that during COVID, because I was working from home, the bank I worked for had me working from home until I went full-time with what I do now, which I work home all the time now. But I was spending a lot of time buying and trying new things because the free time was there. And it was a lot of fun to explore new spirit expressions that I had not dived into prior to that. But then, you reach a certain point where you kind of find your wheelhouse and you find your comfort level. And then, your liver can only hold so much. You can only go through so much in a lifetime. So you do at some point have to kind of, as much as I love to play with experimentation and trying new things, when it comes to sipping for enjoyment, you do have to kind of at some point figure out what you like and what you, and I think COVID helped me explore that. I think that the being at home, the having the free time enabled me to dive into all kinds of things that I probably wouldn't have if I had just been going through the mill of 9 to 5 every day, you know, kind of thing.
So I got into bourbon like literally just a hair before COVID. So I didn't get into bourbon because of COVID, but it timed up to where it really happened like that.
Yeah.
But I was into it just barely before that.
But man, I look back and I hate to say this because it's a love-hate thing, but like I have fond memories of that 1 to 2 year COVID period. You know, I know it was horrible. You know, I'm not talking about the virus and this and the whole pandemic thing. I'm talking about the whole whiskey from home.
Yeah.
You know, like everybody, it was like all of a sudden YouTube content just skyrocketed. Blogs started producing more content than ever. Yeah. It was like, if you wanted to know something about a whiskey, it was like it was there that night. Like a whiskey could have come out that day, and you could find like a YouTube video and 5 blog posts that night.
Boom.
Right there. It was like content was king, and it was a lot of content. It wasn't the typical, and nothing against the media folks, but you do have your mainstream media, right?
Yeah.
And they'll take a press release and they'll spin it. And then they'll get a media sample and they'll try it and they'll give you their little tasting notes.
They'll give you the 15 tasting notes.
Exactly.
And everything, whether it's a $30 bottle or $200 bottle, is all great and it's all good.
You saw all that prior to COVID.
Right.
But then when COVID hit, it was kind of like that kind of stuff kind of took a backseat and the consumer kind of took over, like the TikToks and the Instagram and the Facebook and the YouTube. It was like content all the time because everybody had this free time, and I would stay up till like 1 and 2 in the morning watching YouTube channels of people I don't even know if they exist anymore. Like I was just whatever channel was coming up on my search queue I would watch. You know, it was a really interesting time. It has plateaued. There was kind of that whole like you said, free time, free money. You know, people were getting involved at a heavier level than they would have if they had a 9 to 5 they were going to on a daily level. I don't think it's going to bust like people keep saying. I think that a lot of that is just I think there's a lot of pessimism, and I think there's a lot of people in bourbon that kind of want it to, I hate to say this, they kind of want it to fail in a way.
Some of those want to do that possibly too, just to have the prices drop so they can get stuff they want to drink more.
I think what they fail to see is that like what happens when that happens is innovation dies.
Yeah.
Innovation dies. If you kill the bourbon category and you drop it, if you make a new glut, for example, let's just say we turn this into 1983 right now. A lot of people lose their jobs. Innovation dies. And we're talking about no more LTOs, except maybe travel retail or foreign export type of things like Turkey did back through the 90s and 2000s. And the shelfers will probably get better quality-wise because all the older whiskey is going to get dumped into them and you pay a cheap price. That sounds good, you know, from a certain point of view as a consumer, but is it really a good thing when you're all about innovation, trying to find new profiles, trying to kind of get that bleeding edge kind of thing? Do I want a new glut? Personally, no. I don't think that's a good thing for the industry. I don't think it's a good thing for the hobby. I don't think it's a good thing at all. It sounds cool because like, oh yeah, people think in their head, I'm going to buy Cheesy Gold Foil for like $50. It's like, no, that's a long time ago. That's gone. You know, you could probably end up with some pretty cool older age-stated whiskeys for cheap. I don't think you're going to go back and all of a sudden everything's going to turn into Glut era whiskey.
It can't.
No.
It's the wood, man.
No.
100-year-old trees versus 20-year-old trees. It's a different animal.
And you can say, oh, okay, well, at least the prices will go down. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Inflation's pretty crazy right now.
Yeah.
Like buying a bag of chips, I say this a lot of times. People get mad because it's like a repeated example, but a bag of Ruffles chips is $7.
Yeah.
You know, $7 for a bag of chips that I can eat in a day. Okay, and you're going to be like, "What do you mean that whiskey's $100?" Well, it's $100, but I can sip on that whiskey for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe a couple years, depending on what the whiskey is. Mm-hmm. And you're going to tell me that's too expensive when I'm like paying out the wazoo for a bag of chips.
That's what we were talking about before we turned the microphones on. Was about 1924.
Yeah.
And we started talking about that a little bit, and it's 10-year age stated, and people didn't like the price. And something I brought up was, if it wasn't part of that Whiskey Row series, if they made it their own separate drop on it, I don't think people would complain about the price at all because it's as good or better than the birthday bourbons. Yeah.
Price is it's a really funny thing right now. It is touchy, weird thing right now. People, they want to judge a whiskey. They'll take the price and they'll compare it to the specs. And they'll say, well, that's not worth it. And it's like, they haven't even tasted it. You know what I mean?
We just ran into that last week with your Raconteur Rye.
I hear it all the time. Like,
So-
7 years, 130. It's like, but have you tasted it? Just
Right.
taste it. Just do me the favor of tasting it. You
My
know?
response on that was you have $23 Jim Beam 7-year.
Yep.
And you have Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond $60 7-year.
Yeah.
Taste nothing alike.
Correct.
At all.
Right.
Age is just part of the component.
Right.
And fortunately, some people have listened to us on that. Listen, last week's episode, I've had probably, which I did offer up. I said, hey, I bought some extras.
You put yourself out there.
I've had.
I was like, what are you doing, dude?
Well, you don't know how many I bought. So, no. I've had probably 8 people reach out. So that, like, all right, we're going to trust you on this. And they're thoroughly going to enjoy it. I got one local guy already picked his bottle up from me.
Yeah.
Sent me a picture of him drinking, and he was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
He's like, wow. He's like, if you get another one, I'm like, I have to wait and see once the dust settles. I don't know I'll have another one. But it is legit, man.
Well, I mean, credit to James at Woodwork because it was one of these things where he was like, hey, would you want to do a barrel pick? And I said, send me a bunch of samples. I'll give them a try, whatever. He sent me a bunch of samples, and he said, hey, if you want to do a blend, I'm not opposed to it. So I tasted through all the samples, and there was some good stuff there, but like nothing that like really stood out as being unique. Like it's MGP, right? So for the record, MGP makes fantastic whiskey. They're very consistent. They make a good quality product. I'm not one of these people that knock MGP. Yes, are there producers out there that take 4-year, barely, non-age stated bourbon from MGP and finish it in this or that and like charge a high dollar? Sure. There are some out there that do that. But I think that for the most people recognize that MGP is a place to get a quality source of whiskey. And James has a lot of MGP. But unlike some places where they just let it sit there and they let it age and then you bottle it straight, he put it in French oak, put it in Mizunara, put it in toasted barrels, tried different things, more out of like experimentation, trying to figure out what it would do. And I picked up on that. Like I tasted these different barrels and thought, I don't necessarily want this as a single barrel, but damn if this couldn't be good in the right blend.
Yeah.
And when he gave me permission to do a blend, I said, do I have to use 100% of the barrel? Can I do to my exact ratio? And he said, yes. And I'm like, okay, you don't mind there being waste? And he said, I don't mind. And I said, game on. And I sat there and tried to find that right ratio. And because I had that freedom, I was able to land on something that I personally enjoyed. And I can't say that everybody else would enjoy it, but I personally enjoyed it. And it ended up being a blend of straight of a toasted barrel that was 48 months cured, which that's a long time curing.
That's what we talked about last week.
You get a deep interaction there with the whiskey and the wood. And then the Mizunara, of course. I can't get into the ratios. James wouldn't want me to do that, but I will say that the Mizunara finished whiskey is the majority of the blend, and the toasted is the smallest part of the blend, but it's the greatest part of the color. Like that 48-month cured and toasted was 90% of that whiskey's color. Because if you had it on its own, it was so intense. It was almost too intense. But in a blend
of the toasted,
it was just too intense. It was like drinking a Coke concentrate. You worked at like a fast food and they have the Coke concentrate. It's like
worked at Burger King for about 5.5 years. There we go.
That stuff will you just you don't and so as a blend element, it worked very, very well. And I think that if you sit there and you just judge a whiskey on its specs, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because as a critic of whiskey, whether you're just an armchair critic or whether you're a professional critic, whether this is just your hobby or this is your job, if you don't taste it, you haven't done your job. You to sit there. Now, I agree, there are some things that are just so ridiculous that you have to call them out. Like, okay, I understand that there are whiskeys now that are $7,500 and $10,000 coming from well-known distilleries, and the specs don't necessarily line up with the price. Those are a kind of a different type of whiskey. That's your I'm Fortune 500 CEO. I want something fancy on my bar.
No one else has.
It doesn't matter really what it tastes
Exclusivity.
like. Exactly. You're buying it because it is a conversation piece or it is a brag piece, whatever.
Kind of like my old Louisville pick.
It's a brag piece.
Oh, yeah. Both of those in there for Shannon.
But,
So that's how Raconteur came to be then. question. So our fearless leader, Anthony, sent us about 400 questions. Steven's been doing a great job kind of working those in, but the last 3 or 4 questions he's just rolled into automatically. So that's good. That's where we're wondering so with Pride of Anderson County.
Yeah.
You did that with Pablo, Rare Character.
Right.
Those were single barrels, though.
Right.
That's a little bit different than making your own blend. So was it nerve-wracking? Was it nervous? Was it this? Was it that? But I didn't know that's how it came about. It came about by him saying, "Hey, do you want to do a pick?"
Yeah.
That is freaking awesome.
It was literally this.
That's how it came to be.
He was like, "Do you want to do a pick?" He sent me a bunch of samples. I tried them all. They were all great, but none of them stood out as this barrel that I had to have. And he was like, and again, James has a phenomenal library, and just out of what he sent me, dude, they were all great stuff.
He is. And he's a wizard of that stuff.
Sure, he is. But it all tasted, very MGP like, which is a good thing. I wanted something that would be different. I wanted something that didn't taste like anything else, and I wanted to find one of those oddball single barrels. And sometimes you have to taste through 100 barrels to get to that, And all of those as good as they were, and they would in a blind compete with any of the other brands that bottle MGP. They didn't have anything that I was like, oh my God, this is way different.
Right.
When he said you could do a blend, and I started putting things together, that's when light bulbs started going off. This is really kind of getting into a territory where you can't replicate it with a single barrel. So when you take Mizunara and 48-month cured and toasted and blend, you're not going to find a single barrel that really tastes like that. And so when I came up with that initial blend, I texted James and I'm like, try this, because he's got the sources at his distillery. So I said, this is the ratio combination. I sent him the combination, and there was a long pause there, and I'm like, oh my God, he doesn't like this. I came up with something really bad, and he was just like, I really like this. This is really good. Yeah. And he's like, I think we got something here. And he put his own input into it. He's like, I think I got some straight that I can add to it to kind of balance it out, and I said, go for it. Let me know. He put some straight in it, sent me a new batch and a full bottle, and I'm like, oh, man, this is really going somewhere now. Yeah. And he's like, I got this other idea. I think what we'll do is we'll cycle everything through the Miz casks. Yeah. So we'll do the blend with the straight and the cured, but then we'll also make sure that those go into the Miz too. Right. And he started cycling everything through the Miz, and then that's when we had the J-Hob tasting, and it was just it clicked. It was like, okay, now this is serious. This is really getting somewhere. Yes. And then after that J-Hob tasting, I think it went through one more cycle. One more round of Miz, and it just that was it. That was where it needed to be. And it all happened by chance. And then the whole Raconteur thing was just me walking my dog, trying to think of how I want, how do I want to bottle this? What do I want to call it? And
you walking your dog, listening to Journey Drinkers.
yeah. I mean, I was listening to podcast music, whatever, and I was like, I had come up with, and I can't remember what it was. I had come up with another name, and I looked it up, and somebody else already had it. And I was just like, dang it. I'm like, okay, well, what is it going to be
Evan
now?
Williams is already taken. Son of a mother's uncle.
I can't remember what it was, but it was something else, and it was already taken. And I was just like, well, dang it, what am I going to do now? And I was sitting around, and for some reason, I was infatuated at the time with these old, have you ever seen the old mid-1800s boxing posters? It's two guys, and they've got their curled fists and the handlebar mustaches. It's bare-knuckled, boxing. And the posters have this they always have eagles and shields and banners and these really drapery. It was this really kind of interesting look. And I was like, that'd be cool for a label to have this mid 1800s looking label. And then I started thinking about what could I use for that, and I thought about Gangs in New York, right? And Bill the Butcher and all this kind. And I'm like, that would make for a very cool kind of inspiration for a label. And some people say the label looks like a dollar bill or whatever. It does kind of have a money look to it, but if you think about it, that's, our money that we use today is
that's
based
on...
That's
what you had said, Stephen. That's what Stephen said.
Yeah, it's based on designs from the 1800s. I mean, when they started doing paper currency, that's what it looked like. I wasn't intentionally trying to make a label look like money. It just kind of had that kind of look to where it's not quite monochromatic, but it's almost monochromatic. It's it's got green and white, but then it's got shades of this or shades of that and a little bit of gold. So it's actually a 3-color printing if you technically want to know. But that was one of those things where we started coming up with the artwork. I did this really crappy sketch. I'll have to show it to you. Y'all laugh after the podcast. I don't draw very well. I drew the label. And it's close to kind of what it is, where everything's placed, but it's not near as good. And I sent that to my friend Ricky, who's an artist and who did all my books. And he came up with that sketch, and I'm like, you got it.
Boom.
You got it. Boom. We got it. Yeah. And then I went to... I went to Dan Jansen, who's the president of Lincoln Design Company, who I'd met through Bourbon Lore, and I said, look, if you had to go to a printer in the United States, any printer, I said, what printer would you go to for a whiskey label? And he's like, Valhalla Printing in Kansas City, Missouri. And they do posters for bands like Tool and My Morning Jacket and Conan O'Brien, Neil Diamond, all kinds of folks. And so I sent them the artwork, and they loved it. And they said this would be great for our vintage press. And so they did it on a 57, manual letterpress. You do a color a day, and it just turned out just better than I ever could imagine. So all the imperfections that you see on the label, those are real. Those aren't like a lot of people use what they call like a distress layer in Photoshop, to kind of simulate. Yeah. But this is all legit. Like, the spots where there's little ink missing and stuff. That's legit. That's from just a manual printing press back when, there was not a thing as perfection.
These are the blue jeans that you literally have from 1984. These are not 2024 that are made to look distressed.
That's right.
These are like the real deal.
That's the real deal.
So the big question is, this has batch number 1 on it.
Yeah.
Is there going to be more batches?
We could do batch 2 today. I mean, we've got plenty left over. We could do a batch triple that size if we wanted to. I'm personally a very conservative person, and I try to make sure that everybody is satisfied, happy. I'm kind of waiting on that court of public opinion to kind of tell me, is this something that you want more of?
Right.
If you want more of it, we can provide it. If it's fine as a one and done and unique expression and you're happy with it, then that's fine. But James and I personally, our goal is to get this to as many people as possible. So if that means making 200, 300, 400 more batches to make that happen, we're willing to do it.
Now, would the batches be identical, or would you start over again?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So we have enough to redo this essentially.
Right.
But we also have some stocks that we could throw in there to make it a little bit different.
Fun. Yeah.
And our, we're leaning to do that.
Well, I was texting with James the other day, and not to ruin anything, I was talking about how good this was and this and that, blah, blah, blah. He sent a text that said, next release will be better.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Are you kidding me, bro?
So we've been talking, he's been playing with some stuff.
And he told me, he's like, I can't tell. I'm like, don't tell me, because I will freaking tell everybody, so don't tell me. But he said there's some other component that will kick it up a notch, he said.
He did something.
But I said, don't tell me what it is, because I have freaking diarrhea of the mouth.
So he said, I'm not going to spoil it. He said, I just dumped a barrel of X.
Yeah.
And I think
don't say it.
I think it would be cool to put rye in it.
Right.
And I said, you think so? And he's like, I do. I'm like, okay, do it.
And that's something we were talking about. On the last episode, Anthony asked, I said, I didn't know. So that's one of the questions we had. It's kind of like, for this release, something Anthony brought up was about, didn't seem like it was all over the social media as much, and the pushing. His example was, there was a big, huge live event, I think on Instagram or something, with Frank, who's been on several of the picks.
For Old Cassidy.
For Old Cassidy.
Right.
And it's like he was wondering, that was like a big push, but that was also a $400 bottle. But he was wondering about this. What was your thought process on this? And for the push on it, not as big a push. And I thought maybe it's because you really wanted more people to have it and it wouldn't sell out in 12 seconds flat on Bourbon Outfitter kind of thing, or what. But also said, this was a pretty big batch. Was it 520? 520.
Yeah, it was complicated. I was torn because, number one, I wanted to make sure that the people that support me financially via Patreon had access to
on that Thursday, the day before.
Right. I wanted to make sure that they had access to it because, none of this would have happened without them. So, I do what I do for a living because people support me, and I wanted to make sure that was there for them. At the same time, I knew it was larger than an amount that I could sell out among my Patreon group. 520 bottles is a lot, especially of $130 whiskey. Mm-hmm.
If you buy 2 cases, it shows up pretty quick. I don't know, but go ahead.
So I had to kind of put my thinking cap on and be like, okay, how can I market this enough to where if a couple hundred bottles go public, it'll sell out, but I didn't want it to be stagnant. I didn't want it to sell out too quickly either. It's a really tricky thing. Yeah. It's like you either sell out super quick and people are angry.
People are mad. You see it all the time.
Yep.
All those rare character releases that Alves helps with and all that stuff, people get upset. Angry in that clubhouse group.
Right. And I was trying to avoid that at the same time. I don't want to leave.
So actually, guess correctly.
Yeah. I don't want to leave the retailer holding the bag with a bunch of cases either, or like nothing got moved.
Yeah.
You have to let people know. Like, it's not going to come out and let people know about it itself. You have to kind of let people know that it exists, At the same time, me and James, we're not Diageo, we're not Pernod, we're not Campari, we're not Suntory. We don't have this budget to like go out and market this stuff or send a bunch of comps out.
That's what I said. I said Rare Character's budget's bigger than David's.
So we had to be selective, So I literally took like the comp bottles that I got from the first batch, I opened them and poured them into 100 milliliter samples and got them to people that I thought would appreciate it. And I focused on content creators that were Patreon supporters. So if they had a YouTube channel, I didn't care if they had 100 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers. If you supported me, I wanted to get you a sample of it.
I got a sample of it.
And I wanted to get it.
We have about 13 listeners, 10 are family. So, no, I'm just teasing.
You should have 13,000, man. This is a great podcast.
Thank you, brother.
But the idea was to get it to the people that mattered to me, that I felt like, put their time and money into me. I wanted them to have it back. And
I was texting you that night. There were all those pictures, and I didn't even drink it until it was in a blind. I blinded like 2 different waves of 4 or 5 each.
Yeah. I mean, I was glad you did that too, because it's easy to go in and be like, hey, I know this person. Or I know
David.
This group,
I like David.
Right. I want this to do well.
I didn't taste one drop until it was in a blind that I did not know which one it was.
Right. That was like that night at J-Hob when we had the almost final batch. Right. I didn't want everyone to try it on its own, because I felt like that would be kind of like sandbagging in a way. Like it would be kind of like they're going to want to say things to make me happy, like, oh, this is great, whatever. And like I wanted it to be honest. So like we put it up against some. I mean, I'm not going to say what brands, because I'm not trying. We put it up some heavy hitters.
Yes.
Brands minimum were 150 that go up to what, 225, 250.
Last week we put it up against a $300 Kentucky Owl. On the show.
Yeah. And so we did that blind
11 years
for what we had about 8-10 people there, and it first, second place for the grand majority of people. And but I wanted that because like if it came in dead last at all of them, at least I would know that I got an honest response.
Right.
Like, and that, I think in this industry, an honest response is a truly valuable thing, because I think there's a lot of spin out there. I think there's a lot of
tons of spin,
brand pleasing.
It is.
And I would rather have someone tell me in my face honestly what they think of a whiskey than just trying to make me feel better.
That's why a lot of our listeners tend to enjoy Steve and Anthony and my reviews on stuff. It seems like, because they were just, there's been a lot of smaller distilleries that have reached out to us wanting to come on, and we're like, I've had your product. You really honestly don't want to come on here.
Sure, you want to do that.
Like you truly don't, because I'm going to be honest, it's a pass for me, So we're trying to work around that and think about different ways to approach that, because we, do want to be more inclusive to potentially have more people on. But at the same point, it's like, man, you really don't want to come on here.
I think it's commendable, because if they legitimately don't have a product that stacks up to their competition, they need to know that. Because they're spending tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars on this dream that is not necessarily something they can't achieve, but they need to know now that maybe they need to change directions or try something new.
That's a good point.
That's like Coach Cal.
Yeah.
Hard lessons.
Once Peavy left, once Roebuck left, no one was there to keep him in check. And look what he did the last 4 or 5 years. A bunch of crap nothing.
Yeah.
Because there did nothing but yes men around him.
And I mean the same thing with Raconteur. If somebody's got a problem with this, tell me and James. I want to know.
Yeah.
Because I want the next batch to be better. And I want the batch after that to be better than that.
I have a problem with it.
I
don't have enough of it.
You don't have enough of it. That's the problem.
But I mean, that again, it's one of those things where, you can take negative feedback. You can turn that into negative emotions and do negative things with it, or you can just ignore it altogether. Or you can take that and say, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that every negative review is worth its weight in salt. It's not. There are some people out there that just want to shit on brands to do it. Mm-hmm. And you have to learn how to weed those people out. Because if they're there just to complain, they're not worth your time.
Yeah.
But if they're there and they're giving constructive negative feedback, if they're saying, look, I have no problem with this brand, but this expression was not for me.
Yeah.
It was bitter, the finish was dry, or whatever that bourbon might be or rye might be, or whatever notes they come up with, you should listen. Because maybe there is something to what they're saying, especially if you start getting more than one person saying the same thing.
Well, last week with Steven, one of the big things he said was, it's 120 proof. He's like, there's no ethanol. up on here. You could feel the hug in your chest, Steven said, but not
light.
It was not, didn't draw you up. No big burn up there.
I don't know if you remember the very first batch I sent you was 130 proof. And I didn't think it was hot, but I sent it to a bunch of people.
Yeah, I didn't think it was hot, but I drank higher proof whiskey.
But I had some other people come back and say it was hot.
Gotcha.
Like it was a little bit hot for me.
Yeah.
And James was like, I think we can kind of tone this down and not lose the flavor. And I'm like, you do what you think's best.
Right.
And he added some straight to it of a lower proof, and it got it down to 120. And he's like, this is actually better. I think this is sweeter, and I think it has a better profile. And he sent it to me. I'm like, you're right. It is better.
So that's interesting. So you initially had it at 130.
It was around 130 if I recall right.
You wanting the feedback, you sent it out.
Right.
You said it was hot. So why'd you come out at 130 versus?
Well,
something
so
lower?
What happened was he sent me. We blended the components.
These are all barrel proof though, right?
Barrel proof.
You're just
we blend, and I have a refractometer, which is not as strong, it's not as accurate as a hydrometer, but you can get the proof off of a refractometer, and it came in at around 130. And James thought it was around 130. Okay. And then when he added some more straight to it and sent me that second version of it,
he added barrel proof straight that was just lower proof, so it lowered the overall.
Correct. Yeah. And it came back. He said, I think this is about 120-ish. And, by the time it was bottled, it was a little over 120. But that had gone through more cycles of Ms. Compared to what he had sent me. But, that first batch was really a very rough draft. That was just me playing at home with samples and coming up with the ratio that we think that we wanted to go for. And that's what, I literally sent you a sample made up of like home sample stuff.
So I used my last of that in a blind a while back, and it was more 95.5.
Yeah.
This to me just tastes like a barely legal rye.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that Miz, that longer than Miz did that or what.
It was some of the straight that he added, and I think it was that cycling through the Miz. And then also, I think there's something to be said for letting a batch rest.
Yeah, mingle.
Right.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of when you batch whiskey, you have to kind of give it time to kind of mingle and marry and come together. It sounds really silly and old school, but I think there's truth to it. I don't know whether it's molecules bonding or breaking or whatever the science is. I don't claim to be a whiskey scientist. But
in the mashup, we are very scientific and factual.
So were you finding that when you go day to day, that the one like mixture you made the day before tasted completely different the next day because it sat?
Well, it's hard to say. Is it your palate that's a little bit different because you've reset, or is it that?
Well, when you drink 1910 for the first drink every day, you know where your palate is.
There you go.
That's all I'm saying.
You're very consistent. I know some people use the cheese method. Have you heard of that? Where some people, if they're professional wine or whiskey tasters, what they'll do is they find a certain cheese. It could be cheddar, it could be Swiss, but what that specific cheese tastes like every time. So if you get up in the morning and you take a bite of Swiss cheese and it doesn't taste like Swiss cheese normally tastes like, you're having an off day, and you don't need to be judging anything or criticizing anything or selecting anything.
That's my 1910, man.
So, some people use cheese, some people use 1910.
There we go. So where you at on these pours I gave you, bro?
Okay, so I don't know what A and B are.
Yeah.
I like B more than A.
I agree.
They're both great. A has a lot of depth, a lot of layers, a lot of complexity. It's a little bit rough.
A little bit oaky.
It's a little bit oaky. It's got some rough edges to it.
Yep.
But I think if you were to add water to it or maybe batch it with something else, it would get some perfection going there. This one is just whatever this is. It's just fantastic.
So the one on the left is a Hirsch 25-year rye. Mm-hmm. The one on the right is that 2010 Van Winkle rye. That's the Cream of Kentucky rye you're asking about earlier.
Wow. Okay.
So 2010 Van Winkle rye on the right.
Fantastic, dude.
Even the Hirsch is great. It's like 92 proof, I think.
Yeah.
And 25 years old, it's a little bit oakier and a little bit lower proof. I think the Van Winkle is 95, 96 proof, something like that.
There's nothing wrong with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's got some rough edges. Like you said, maybe it spent a little bit too much time.
Yeah. I've heard the Hirsch, the younger ones are like 22 or 23 years, a little bit better supposedly than the 25.
Okay. Would I complain about having a bottle of this?
Right.
Absolutely not. This is fantastic whiskey, but it does have some, like I said, I think it would work well in a blend. If this were like, kind of the core and you added a little bit something to it to brighten it up. This one, on the other hand, the Van Winkle is just killer.
It is. That's great. All right. So I do have a question there, Mr. DJ.
All right.
So one question is, we had people write in, some of our listeners that wrote in asking this question. That listener would be Anthony Lamperos. But, He's like, what is your favorite brand other than turkey? So if like turkey wasn't available, what are you reaching for?
That's tough because I have, like, turkey is like my love. Like, I don't really have another brand that I love like I love turkey.
You might like certain aspects or things of
Correct.
bottle
Like,
here and there.
There are things that I like about a lot of other brands. There are brands that I've visited where I felt like they have like this genuine connection with their customer, and they're not necessarily legacy. On the legacy side, I do enjoy a lot of Beam products. I feel like Beam makes good whiskey. I like Makers. They do one thing, but they do one thing really, really well.
Right.
And they do have some variations of that one thing, but for the most, it's one thing. And they do it really well, and they provide a very good experience for people that visit their distillery. The tour's awesome. The food's awesome.
The fried chicken.
Oh, God. It's just the whole experience. It's like the Disney of whiskey.
The burgoo.
Yeah. But then you have some craft distilleries, to me, that really, like, I feel at home there. Like Ben Holiday. I love Ben Holiday.
That's where Alves is right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
Alves would have been on here tonight with us, but he's out of town. He's in Missouri.
Yeah, well, I mean, people can hate on me all they want to, but when I'm at Holiday, I'm just at home at Holiday as I am in Kentucky. It's just a really wonderful distillery. The people are nice. It has a rich history that people don't even realize. It goes back to the mid-1800s. I mean, this is...
It was like MGP before MGP, kind of like history type stuff. Like the same people related. Yeah, it's some pretty neat stuff.
Their water source is a spring that Lewis and Clark charted. I mean, and that
crazy.
is... And I don't... Like, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, we get limestone, filtered water, blah, 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 and they're getting it reverse osmosis from the municipal water source, right? Ben Holiday actually takes it. The spring feeds their cistern. The cistern, feeds their cookers. So the mash uses that spring water directly. Now, they cut with RO water, but, I mean, there's just something about that. And then, like, there's other craft distilleries like Highwire in Charleston. I love Ann and Scott. I think that what they're doing is really unique because they're focusing on local grains, regional grains, and trying to showcase what their area has to offer from the start. Not just, we're going to go get a bunch of barrels from MGP, we're going to do a bunch of stuff with it. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Raconteur Rye is MGP. I have no problem with MGP at all. I love MGP. But what Ann and Scott are trying to do are literally start from the ground, from the dirt up. And people say, oh, yeah, farm to table, whatever, grain to glass, all these kind of things. They literally are doing that. They have invested in the farming, of their grains. And that means a lot to me. I think there's an authenticity there. Same thing with Wild Turkey. It's what drew me in from the beginning, hearing the stories about the Russells, Jimmy kind of just coming on board right out of high school, dedicating his life, literally his life to bourbon. Like Jimmy, this September, he will be at Wild Turkey 70 years. Like, who works at any job, 70 years, much less a distiller? Like, they were talking today about how this conversation's been going on for a while, but, they've talked about making him Master Distiller Emeritus. He doesn't want the Emeritus title. He said, Emeritus means you're getting rid of me. Emeritus means I'm done. I'm not done. I want to be here. I want to be involved in the process. Now, he's up there in age. He can't do the heavy lifting like he used to. You're not going to find him in the rick house rolling barrels and taking the hammer and popping bungs. But his knowledge, his experience in making bourbon exceeds the grand majority of people out there combined.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's truly a face of the Mount Rushmore of whiskey, or bourbon specifically. When it comes to, like, who is your favorite brand behind Wild Turkey, I can't pick a one. I see a lot of cool stuff happening on the scene. I'm a big fan of Penelope. Penelope is using all MGP, and most of it's young, 4 years, 5 years. For a lot of their expressions, but it's just so cool that, like, Mike and Danny have just, like, embraced that and, like, you know what, That's cool. We're going to find a cool way to market this 4 and 5 year and make it palatable, make it something that people enjoy and not have to spend a fortune on. And they've done it. If you think about a lot of other brands that have taken 4 and 5 year MGP, they've put it in some like cheesy bottle or like some collectible item or some like spinoff of some TV show or some celebrity or just some kind of like gimmick to get you to buy it. And that's not what they're doing. They're like, let's take this and make it the best it can be. And I'm genuinely impressed with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whiskey world needs more of that. It needs people like putting things in at 110%, saying we're going to make this something cool for people to share. So anyway, it's hard to pick a second brand. A lot of them I admire, not necessarily legacy, not necessarily craft.
So we'll just say the answer is coffee. So if turkey wasn't available, David's reaching for coffee. How about that?
Irish coffee at that.
Irish.
Wild Turkey is by far my favorite.
And one more thing, another question. What are some upcoming releases that you may be excited about? I know, like myself personally, I'm excited. Once again, I was very blessed and fortunate you invited me, but I'm excited for our Brook Hill pick.
Brook Hill pick,
and I'm very excited for the Wild Turkey Rye single barrel that we picked.
Yep.
For me, that's like two I'm excited about.
The Brook Hill Rye we picked is going to be awesome. Thank you, Pablo, for letting us do that. The Wild Turkey Rye pick is going to be awesome. Thank you, Bruce. And as far as other things I've seen, I just saw today, and I'm going to botch the specs on this because I literally just saw it on Discord for like 10 seconds as I was at Wild Turkey in the middle of this event. Apparently, there's some TTB approval for some barrel-proof Deatsville Heaven Hill release that's like from Rickhouse AA in Deatsville. I think it may be a William Heavenhill. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look. If that's the case, I'm all over anything from Deatsville.
Yeah. I've had some 94 proof Elijah Craig Deatsvilles that are literally next level.
There is a store about 15 minutes away from me that has a 94 proof Elijah Craig Deatsville, BB, Rickhouse BB pick.
Yeah.
9 years and some change.
Yeah.
$30.
And just slaying.
Killer.
Yeah.
I have purchased multiple bottles of it.
That's awesome.
A friend of mine's purchased multiple bottles of it. We have sent multiple bottles of it to other people. It is the steal of a deal. But so that's on my radar. I mean, obviously, Russell's 15, Master's Keep Triumph.
Have you had the 15 yet?
I have not. I had Triumph tonight.
Yeah.
I did not have the 15, but Triumph, okay, just going to let you guys know, if you're listening, it's killer. I mean, it's probably, definitely top 5 Master's Keep, probably top 3.
Yeah.
Maybe top 2. I'm telling you.
That's awesome.
It's really, really spectacular.
So speaking of, you said you go to a store to get that one bottle.
Elijah Craig.
Do you still bottle hunt, or how do you get your bottles?
Yeah. It's a mix. I mean, I buy from Bourbon Outfitter.
Yeah.
I buy from Seal Box. I buy from Keg and Bottle. But I do shop locally. But here's what I shop for locally. I don't hunt anymore. I don't do the whole bourbon hunting thing where I drive around. I don't have that kind of time anymore, and it's not worth it anymore. I
heard Elmer T. Lee's getting released tomorrow at 9 o'clock. So if you want, we can go camp out tonight.
10 years ago, I would drive around. I ain't doing that now, and I've never waited in line. I mean, my time is worth more to me than any brown liquor. I'm sorry.
There we go.
I am not going to, I mean, if I can go home and pour a Russell's Reserve single barrel, or I can wait in line 3 hours for some whatever bourbon, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to go home and have Russell's Reserve. There is no reason for me to wait in line. Now, I don't mind paying a premium, if a whiskey's coming out and it's $300 and it's something I'm genuinely excited about, I don't blink an eye. These people that are like, yeah, but $25 shipping and blah, blah. Shipping is a convenience. Like, do you want to drive to D.C.? I don't want to drive to D.C. If $25 will get the bottle to me from D.C., I will gladly pay $25 than getting in my car and driving to D.C.
And like I said, it's free shipping at $400. Just buy some extra crap.
There
Get it at $400.
There you go. But the people that bitch about online shipping when it comes to alcohol, they don't understand. Like, there are a lot of hoops to go through to ship alcohol legally.
Yeah, because it's illegal for the most part. Right?
Yeah. You have to go through a lot of bullshit. Like, just permits and licensing.
Laws that shouldn't be in place.
Exactly.
Antiquated.
And so you're gonna complain because it costs you $25 to ship a bottle. I don't know. It doesn't bother me.
Glass.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. And I don't want to get off on this topic too long, but people that complain about shipping, if you don't want to pay shipping for bourbon, just don't buy bourbon online. Just go to your local store and buy bourbon. But don't complain whenever there was some special release that came out online and you were like too snooty to pay the shipping, So, but yeah, I do go to stores. But what I look for when I go to stores I look for things that I haven't tried. And they're usually $30, $40 bottles, like that Elijah Craig, like Penelope Architect, like the Old Pepper bottle in Bond I bought recently. I see something, I haven't tried it before. If it's less than $50, I'm just going to buy it and try it. And if it's not good or if it's okay, that's fine. I'll just give it to somebody else. I give away a ton of bottles. I'm not a person.
You gave me a bottle tonight.
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I feel like whiskey's made to be shared. If I open something up and I try it and it's not my jam, it could be somebody else's. And I'm not going to try to profit off of that. I'm just going to give it to them. So, when I go to stores, it's usually just to find something that I haven't had yet, or it's to replace something that I've finished up that I drink regularly, like, Russell's 10, Russell's Single Barrel, 101, Rare Breed Rye, these types of things I buy regularly.
Nice.
Well, guys, before we forget, we actually did have a shout out this week that we need to mention, Kenny.
Yes. So without Anthony here, things are just crazy at this place. It's things are going awry. So we look forward to Anthony being back here. But so Adam from Ohio, he sent a message and he said, "Hey, Anthony or Steven or Kenny, I realized today I was driving past one distillery today that you reviewed back a few episodes and had to stop in and get a bottle. Southern Distilling Company's Paragon Single Barrel Cask Strength Wheated." He's like, "I'm so glad I did. The folks at the distillery were asking me where I found out about them. I told them I heard about them on your podcast."
So nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
They said the bottled and bond Paragon has beaten Weller 12 in blind tastings recently. And then Adam said, which I believe, during your episode 127, Kenny blinded the Cask Strength Single Barrel against Weller Foolproof, and it was very close. So he said, "Thanks again for such an awesome recommendation and great review of the product, Adam from Ohio." So Adam, we do appreciate the reaching out.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do. We try to find some stuff. I mean, that Paragon was like a $69 bottle maybe. That's more, and that was even cask strength, not the bottled and bond one that's more readily available. That's going up against some of that allocated stuff you have to hunt for and pay for, extra money to get. So
if I remember, it did really well against the nosing and
it did good. Yeah,
it wasn't even close.
Yeah,
so
it was a very good pour. And speaking of good pours,
what do we have in front of us?
Well, our fearless leader Anthony wanted me to ask David, what are your top 3 wild turkey pours of all time? And he said 3. I'm thinking 400.
Maybe.
So, so what we did, David, you can, if you want to answer that now, or we can say what I've done here, because I know what my top 4 turkey pours I've had, and the number 1, number 2 kind of flip back and forth. So you want to go ahead and answer what you think your top 3 pours are, and then I'll tell the listeners what we're getting ready to do.
Okay, well, there's 2 different ways to look at this. You could judge it on the spirit alone, and if you're going to do that, it's really going to be hard to top the dusty stuff.
Yeah.
Especially this lineup that we have in front. This is not a double blind. This is a blind.
Single blind.
It's a single blind. I know what's in here, and these are all phenomenal turkey expressions, pretty much top of the heap.
Yeah.
Without question. But then there's also that sentimental factor. Yep. It's hard for me to let go of that 1981 101 8-year that
it really sparked it for you.
Someone sent to me,
boom. Mm-hmm.
and I opened it up and I smelled it, and I was like, "Holy shit, what is this?" Right? Yeah. That was literally a life-changing moment.
Yeah.
Like, I would not be doing what I'm doing now had I not knows that. Like, I knows that, and I thought, "What is this? I'm all about this. I want this for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
And there's other examples of that too. Like the first time I tasted Revival, Master's Keep Revival, Ryan and I were chatting, Ryan Alves and I were chatting about it. And he was like, "Dude, this reminds me of a saddle that my grandfather used to keep in like the jump seat of his truck or something."
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly the deal. It was something like that. And he's like, "There's just this smell and it just reminds me of that saddle that he always kept."
It's the memories.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, when you have a whiskey that does that, that like just transports you back in time to a place or a person or a memory or a moment, that's pretty much priceless. Like you can't put it. And so there are Wild Turkey bottlings that are modern that aren't necessarily worth hundreds or thousands of dollars on the secondary that bring that same kind of feeling to me. I'll always love our first pick that we did on site, that Promise to Mr. Porkchop for his dad. You know, it just, we blinded that. First of all, we had an epic pick team, just really a lot of folks that knew what they were doing. And so we blinded that. And, you know, we knew it was our first, but we blinded it just to make sure. And it came out on top. So, you know, that's a favorite. I think the Bottled and Bond, to me, the Master's Keep Bottled and Bond is really special because there's only been 2 Bottled and Bond Wild Turkey expressions. The one that Jimmy did called American Spirit in 2007, and then Master's Keep Bottled and Bond in 2020. And what I think is so cool about that is they're both great whiskeys, but the way that the 2020 was done, it was like a nod to Jimmy, but it was so Eddie. It had that oak profile that, like, Eddie likes an oakier profile than Jimmy, and it really shines in that 17 Bottled and Bond. I mean, everything is just the proof is perfect, the oak level's perfect, the age is right where it needs to be. Everything, like, to me, that is just like of all the Wild Turkeys ever bottled, if that's not top 10, then you can I'll walk. Because like that one, maybe even top 5. It just something about that just screams perfection. Yeah. And there's a lot of turkeys like that, revivals like that. There's some barrel picks that are like that, where you just kind of like everything comes together and just nails it. You know, It doesn't have to be dusty. I think that's another thing. Like, there's a myth when it comes to turkey. People used to say, well, it's not good turkey unless the turkey's looking at you, because, you know, that's a nod to the turkey facing forward. I think that's not true. Yeah, there's a lot of amazing dusty turkey, but there's a lot of dusty turkey that's just okay. Like, I don't know if you ever had the travel retail tradition. It's like, it's okay. It's like, it tastes like 101 from the 90s. It's not anything to brag about.
Freedom's another one I thought was good, but it's nothing like to blow you away.
It's not going to blow you away. It's good. It tastes like classic turkey. The Freedom is a little bit higher in proof, so it kind of has a rare breedish vibe to it. But it's not better than 0199 rare breed. Right. So Dusty is just and I even wrote an article about this one time where I was like, I think I called it like, Dusty Bourbon isn't all that, or Dusty Bourbon is just a profile or something. I forget the name of the title, but the gist was, like, Dusty Bourbon is a profile, but it's not the end-all be-all. Doesn't mean that you can't have a cool profile now. So with turkey, obviously you've got your 17101, your Cheesy Gold Foil from 85, 88. You've got your MDS 14-year. You've got Tradition. You've got American Spirit. You've got Donuts. There's all kinds of cool ways you can go with classic and dusty turkey. But that doesn't mean that those are the only turkeys that are worth seeking out.
Yeah, and that's one of my buddies up in Michigan, Harry Micah. We're talking, I guess it was back in like January, about some different bottles, and he's a big Four Roses guy, and I had a bunch of Four Roses that, because I've kind of transitioned, man, where I am, what you mentioned, sentimental, I'm basically getting rid of tons of my bourbon because I'm really just geared in more now. I love my Irish whiskey. I love a lot of my Dusties, and I'm mainly keeping picks that have more of a sentimental value. Yeah. Either I was on the pick team, Alves picked it, somebody I know picked it, you picked it. I've got, something that's more sentimental, emotional. And so I've really started gearing away from a lot of my standard picks. And that's what I was talking to Harry about, because I was going to move some of my regular ones. And he's like, you know what, 2024, I'm focusing on experiences, not bottles. So he was like, I'm good on bottles right now. I got enough bourbon to last me whatever. 2024 is my year of experiences.
That's a good way to look at it. I do think there's something to be said with culling the herd, but you can't really cull the herd unless you've grown that herd enough to know how to cull the herd. Yeah. So I think we've all kind of dove into this. We've all bought probably more bottles than we'll ever drink in our
lifetime. Right.
But then we figure out by doing that what truly speaks to us. Like, I've got a lot of whiskey at home that, like, it's good, wouldn't have a problem drinking. But is it something like at night I'm like,
you don't keep going, you don't go.
I want to have a pour of that. Yeah. I could probably easily cut half my collection quickly. Yeah. And most of my bottles are open, but I could probably just get rid of half. Like, if if I were left with only 50 bottles, I wouldn't cry. Like, I'd be okay with that. I could find 50 bottles that I could live with. Do I want more than that? Sure. I mean, I like having, you probably do this too. Every once in a while you want to like, ooh, this reminds me of that one thing. And like, you're glad you have it, even though you don't drink it a lot, because you want to like kind of compare it or figure out what makes it tick. Right. It's nice to have it in your cabinet so you can pull it out and like, oh yeah, it does taste like that. But it's still not something you would go to regular. So they're nice to have as what I call like reference pours. You want to have it around so I can like, oh, I know what that tastes like, or I want to compare it. But they're not something I would drink on a regular basis. So if somebody said, well, you have to cut it down to 20 bottles, I could do that. Yeah. Not something I want to do because I like having everything, or I like variety, but I could do it. So I think it comes down to being selective, and whether it's sentimental or whether it's profile based or whether it's some other kind of like I want to have 5 Scotch, 5 Irish, 5 bourbon, 5 rye, whatever. Everybody's different, whatever that is. I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of scaling back as long as you keep an open mind about the future. So like if you live in the past, like I'm only going to drink this from this time period, in my opinion, you're checked out of the hobby. You're done. Yeah. Like you've resigned to just stick with that for the rest of your life. We're going to keep going. We're going to do crazy shit that you've never imagined before.
Such as freaking JT Mellick rice whiskey.
There you go.
That Alves has picked. Oh my gosh, the rice baby.
We just did one.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't make it because
so good.
Had other obligations, but some folks from my group did.
So good.
Yeah, and it's when he how that went down was the first time I tried Mellick, Ryan sent me a message. He said, I'm going to send you a bottle and you're going to tell me what you think of it, but I'm not telling you what I'm sending you.
He did that to us too.
And
he did not tell me.
I'm like, well, is it bourbon or rye? He's like, I'm not telling you shit. He's like, you're going to get it and you're going to try it. You're going to tell me what you think about it. I'm like, all right. Yeah. And he sent it to me and I pulled it out of the box and I'm like, rice whiskey. What is this? And I tried it. And the first thing I thought about, I was like, this tastes like one of the better Weller Foolproofs I've had. Yeah. Like it had that kind of like sweet vibe that like you get from like Weller Foolproof, and I'm like, what the heck, dude? I immediately texted him like, dude, I'm all over this. This is really good.
Nuts.
It's great.
And that one he sent us was the Papa something or the whatever.
That was Pop.
Pop. But his pick he did, that rice baby, was even next level compared to that.
Yeah, it's and those guys literally just started. Like Mellick has been doing this for like what, 5 years or something. Like it's nothing, new. A drop in the bucket compared to everybody else. And like for them to like hit home runs this early,
crazy.
It's crazy.
Well, so what we're doing right now, we are going to blind. These are single blinds, but we do have a 1988 Cheesy Gofoil. We have the 14-year MDS. Woo. We have the 17-year Export with the 101. And we have the 15-year Tribute Export, so it's 110 proof.
God, wow.
So might not be the sentimental necessarily, the emotional like we're talking about, but as far as just considered one of the more epic pours of turkey, these are kind of 4 of the more epic. So
more epic? These are the epic.
But so we're gonna hit these. I'm not gonna try to guess what they are. On my first few sips, I'm gonna just try to guess, or not. I'm gonna try to rate first through fourth.
Well, I've got my ranking for the nose. I haven't tasted them yet, but I know what I like for the nose. So I'm gonna go ahead and rate. So I've got my nose order down, and I'm not guessing at which is which.
That's what. So I try not to, like when I'm back in the day when I first started blinding, I would always try to guess what it is.
You get stuck,
but I get skewed.
That. Yeah,
it would skew it. So now I just try to do a score or first through fourth. And then save a couple drinks to once I get my score, then I go back and boom.
You'll get stuck. You'll be like, okay, well if that's this, then you're downhill.
Now your alls, I did pour you all the same order, but I do not know what my order is because you all poured me. So it's so good though, and that's what you said a minute ago. These are back before we turned the microphones back on.
There's no loser.
Like, there's not a loser. I mean, these are like 4 of the epic of epics.
There's one in here that just hits different.
And that's something too, like, we've done, you've invited me on several picks, we've hung out a few different times, but I still don't really, I guess, know like what's in like your like wheelhouse. Are you a, oakier guy? Are you a sweeter guy? Are you this or you are that? And that's why all these are really cool, because what each person gets out of it can be something different,
Yeah.
That's,
Well, getting the, what's interesting about this is they kind of rank differently from nose, taste, and finish. I'm trying to narrow that down.
And to quote Anthony, this is no lot B, but, it's not bad. Delicious.
All of these. Damn.
And what's funny is I've done this same blind at least 4 times. And no joke, I've had a different first and second place each time. I mean, it's just because they're just whatever's hitting that night or just whatever mood I'm in, or I don't know. They're just all, it's like splitting hairs are also good.
Like I have an order for the nosing I like.
Yeah.
But for the palate,
It's tough to pick.
like I wrote something down and then I went back and I don't know
Yeah.
what order I like.
I've got my order done.
I'm about 2/3 of the way done here with I've only drank 3, so once I drink this 4th one, I'll have my initial scoring, then I'll go back and revisit a second
Yeah,
time.
I need to do my scores. Hang on a second. Let me add these up.
And that's all. That's cool what you said earlier. So for the Raconteur, how that came to be, we don't know if you're like what's wanting to do something, coming up with this idea, but it's really just basically James sent you blind, said, "Hey, you want to do a pick?" And then boom, you're like,
Yeah, I mean,
that was an awesome story, man. It was good to hear that.
I mean, he sent me samples, and the labels literally just had like numbers on, like 16 dash so and so. So like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was sipping. I didn't know if it was
Yeah.
bourbon or rye. He sent me both. He sent me bourbons and ryes. I mean, it was pretty obvious. A 95.5 is a profile that you don't usually miss on. But together, they just worked out really well. Okay, I've got my order.
All right, I've got my initial score, so I'm going to go back and hit them one more time, see how it lines up to see if
Dude, these are all bangers. What's interesting is on the nose, there's one that really stands out to me. On the finish, there's one that really stands out. On the palate, they're tighter than I thought they would be.
That's
So-
what I was getting. The
me
problem
look
I
at
was
my-
having too.
Let me
I'll
look at
be
my
interested.
picture
It'll
real
be interesting
quick.
to see how we all line up on that.
Is the nose for you that stands out we're going like 1 through 4? Mm-hmm. Is it the second glass?
Nope.
Okay. Interesting then. Okay.
My favorite nose is the third one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mine too.
No, I looked at that wrong.
From
3.
from left.
Yeah.
I looked at that wrong. Third is what I was going to say. I've got a small little sample bottle as your number 1. So that's third.
3 is the best nose by far, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, not that the others are
No,
slouches,
right.
but 3 just stands out as being super special on the nose. Now, things take a turn when the palate hits. They also take a turn when the finish hits. But on the nose, 3, it's like all the other ones are pretty close. That one just stands out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because your number 3, that's what I totally missed that little small bottle on the far left. Because I put the bottles behind and took a picture. But your 3 is what I thought would stand out on the nose, and I think that's what stands out on the nose for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what your order is, but you don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we'll do.
I'm almost done scoring here.
Yeah. We'll go through the palate, the finish, and then we'll do the overall. But nose, for me, 3 wins the nose. And then I've got a system where I've calculated values, and so I've got a final order as well.
I have a feeling that I'm going to pick a different, which is fine, different
Yeah.
order than my. I said I blind this at least 4 times, and it's every freaking time's a different answer. It's wild.
Well, it's
They're all so different and good, though.
I mean, one of the coolest things about whiskey is it's a very personal experience, and you're not a robot. Tomorrow is not today. Yesterday is not tomorrow. It's like everything's going to be different from day to day. And I would love to have any of these. Like a bottle of any of these is killer. I mean, we're doing like pretty crazy blind here.
Yep.
I mean, it's not quite the epic Sean Brock, Gillian Van Winkle, which Weller's the best Weller, tasting and garden and gun, but you know, we're kind of inching into that territory.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures. A local guy that's friends with Sean shared with me, and he's like, "You can't show anybody." I'm like, "I promise you I won't." But I've saw some crazy Willet and crazy Weller pictures of some blinds they did, and holy crap!
Yeah. You get into this level blind, it's really just like splitting hairs by the like razor, you know.
I hate to do this. Can I leave real quick and pour me my far left glass a little bit more of that?
Yeah. Yep. All right, Kenny, you're good. I like that yours are different order than mine, probably. So.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time here.
God, it's ridiculous.
So I ought to say, I like them all.
Yes.
So
I think it's safe to say
the only
loser gets to go home with me, right?
See, the tough part on doing a blind like this is all of these are so good that where that finish just lingers. I hate to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
But if I don't move on to the next one fast enough, then it's hard to judge and score. But
Exactly.
I also don't want to move on because I just want to have it just finish
I
and
do
just
the
see
same
how.
thing. When I do a comparison, I really focus hard on the nose because that's the one thing you can do and not get inebriated. You know, you can really drill in on the nose. Like you can spend all day on the nose and not have any kind of sense of
Right.
Yeah.
you know, getting alcohol in your system. When you get to the palate, you can let it sit there for a minute, but you have to immediately go to the next glass because if you just let it sit too long and then you go, it's like that experience is gone and then you restart. It's like you want to like go boom, 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 boom. It's like doing a barrel pick. You kind of want to like, let's go, because that's going to be like the lead. And like, if you stop and say, well, I want to cleanse my palate with water, what I found is that you're actually diluting the whiskey in your mouth. Yeah. You kind of need to if you're going to do that, you need to wait a minute before you take another sip because you're kind of like, and that's just my opinion, but like at home, I try to go bam, 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 because the second it flattens out the next pour.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to do that, I wait a minute. I rinse my mouth out and I kind of like walk around, let the water leave my mouth, and then go back to the whiskey. But anyway, it's better to just go in a row, but I'm pretty confident with what my order is tonight. I didn't really have too much second guessing, even though they're all bangers. I mean, it's judging based on nose, taste, finish. I think I've got it. I will say that Cream of Kentucky Van Winkle
Isn't that good, bro?
shit, dude. God, ridiculous. And comparing it, like after having this turkey tasting, you get a lot more apple in that Van Winkle rye. I mean, it's rye versus bourbon, so it's different.
I am literally torn from first, second place. Dang it.
My second and first are very close.
All right, so I've got my scores. All right, fellas. So you two have the same order. My order is different
Okay.
as far as your pours go. So either I can go first and you all go last, or it
I'll
don't
go
matter.
first.
Okay.
I'll tell you my order, 3 different phases, and then total.
Let's go.
So nose, the third one was my favorite nose.
That's what I would have guessed.
Next up was the fourth.
Okay.
Then second. The second glass was third place,
Yep.
and the first glass was fourth place.
Okay.
Okay.
I can 100% see that.
Okay. Taste, things changed a little bit.
Yeah.
The second glass was my favorite on the taste.
Yes. Okay.
The third was my second favorite.
Okay.
The fourth was my third favorite.
Okay.
And the first was my last.
You just didn't like the first.
Well, it wasn't I didn't like it. I'm just
No, but dude, this
Comparing.
is like
yeah, this is epic on top of epic.
Yeah, this is prime
Yeah.
ribeye at Ruby's versus a prime
what we're
ribeye
probably
at
doing
Tony's
is
versus
we're probably like comparing which one's closer to barrel proof, honestly.
yeah.
And on the finish, I had 4 as my first place, 3 as my second place, 2 as my third place, and 1 as my last place.
Yeah.
Went in kind of backwards order.
Yeah.
So if you add all of those up, the order, if you gave each one of these points for
Yeah.
those orders, my order would be 3 is in first place,
3 is okay.
4 is in second place, 2 is in third place,
Yep.
and 1 is in last place.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I can.
All right.
Yep. I can. You're gonna be pleasant. You're gonna be surprised.
Okay,
But
okay.
probably in a good way.
Okay.
So I had my first place was for the nose was the third glass.
Yep.
Okay.
I had the second place was the first glass.
Okay.
Third was the second glass.
Okay.
And fourth was the fourth glass.
Gotcha.
So first and second we swapped out. Okay.
Okay. So for
Or first and, no, I'm sorry. Second and fourth we swapped out. Okay.
Then palate, where you at?
So yeah, palate. I had, man, it was like cutting hairs here. I have the third glass is first.
Okay.
The first glass is second. The fourth glass is third, and the second glass is fourth.
Okay.
But I think they're interchangeable. And I
Yeah.
didn't do finish. I didn't have enough liquid left to process that.
Yeah. I can pour you some more, but
That's all right.
okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Overall, where did you land?
I mean, I guess third. I had 2 ones on the third
So
pour.
third was your first place, then
Third.
overall.
And then and I guess first was the
Number
first
1.
glass was the first glass.
What was second
Wait.
place?
Second place was the first glass.
Okay. That was your fourth, David.
Yep.
That was your second.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I understand that based on knowing.
But
both
you had
of
third
two.
as your first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We both landed on the same first place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were number 3 as your first place? Okay. And then you went number 4 as your second place?
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. So do you want me to
Yeah. You tell me what.
reveal to you all what you picked, or go ahead and do my
You go ahead
my
and do
pick
yours.
first?
You go-
Okay. So for me, my first glass and my third glass. I went back and forth, and it was so hard to pick a winner on those two. I even left the room, had you pour me some more of the first glass.
Okay.
Like, I literally scored one a 9 and one an 8.9. I'm literally like, they're so close. I'm going to lean my first glass as my overall first place.
Okay.
When I say that, my second place is my third glass, but I literally scored a 9 and an 8.9. I was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I almost flipped them.
Okay.
My glass number 2 is my third place, and my glass number 4 is my last place, my fourth place.
Okay.
I have a feeling that my glass number 3 that I said second place, like I said, it was so close. I think even though we poured each other separately blind, I think my number 3 glass is what your all's number 3 glass is also. I really think that, but I might be wrong. We'll see.
We'll find out. You want to know first, or you want us to know first?
Tell me first.
Okay. So your number 1 was the Tribute Export.
Okay, Export. Yep.
Your number 2
I'm going to guess as 88.
No, was the 10117.
Oh, wow. It was a 17 year.
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw 17 years. So we did pull different then. So I got Export as my first place.
Yep, Export. Now the Export 15 Tribute. Yeah.
Export 15, so it's 110 proof.
Yep.
But I literally had a score of a 9 and 8.9. And I kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I could not pick between those two as being, Then my third place was my second glass. MDS. I am shocked on that.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, hey, these are
here's the thing.
All bangers.
So if you look at my score sheet, on my first go around, I scored my fourth glass, and the second glass, I actually had the fourth glass winning.
Okay.
But then on my second go around, I went ahead and flipped those two.
Okay.
So those two were kind of close. So my first and second place were clear ahead for me, and then my other two were pretty close as well.
So obviously the fourth place is the 88.
It's 88 CGF. Okay. Wow. That's awesome.
And I think we can all admit that on any given day, these could all swap places.
This is the fifth time doing this, and they really do switch places.
Yeah. All right. So where did I land, and where did we both land?
Yeah.
All right. So for you guys, your far left, your first glass.
Yep.
Actually, no. Let's not do that. Let's do it this way. You picked number 3 as your first place.
Yeah.
David. That is, and you picked that 3 as your first place.
Correct.
88 CGF.
Huh.
88 CGF was your first place.
How about that?
Then David, your second place was your glass number 4.
Yep.
That is the 15-year Tribute Export 110 proof.
Okay.
Stephen, your second place was glass number 1.
Okay.
Which was your fourth place, David. That's the MDS 14.
I've always said that's my favorite turkey.
That's my least favorite. When all these blinds, usually that's why I was surprised I picked. Yeah. I was surprised I picked the MDS 14 over the 88 because I usually like MDS the least of all them. And so number 2 glass
17.
is 17-year export.
How about that?
Yep. It's wild, man.
This is like the inverted order I probably would have guessed, you know.
But it's just it's wild, man. But they're all so good.
They are. I think that's what it boils down to is kind of like if you had any of these individually, you go, oh, okay, this is A+ Grand Slam whiskey, best ever, whatever. But when you put them all up against each other, it's it becomes very, very difficult because in a way it's kind of like, what are you in the mood for? Do you want more? Because they're all A+ whiskeys.
Yeah.
It's do you want a longer finish? Do you want a creamier mouthfeel? Do you want more dusty notes? Do you want more spice notes? So it's everything kind of it just depends. If I did this blind tomorrow, I swear I would have a different order.
100%.
I know I would have a different order.
I agree with you. And that's where, for me, for number 1 and 3, I said 9 and 8.9 score. They were a toss-up. Now, I'm glad there's a toss-up because the 15-year export is, I only have one more of those unopened, but I've got 6 or 7 of the 17-year finished right at the top for me. So I'm glad I finished at the top line because I've got a bunch of those bottles, so that's good.
Well, the thing about the 15 export is if you look at our scores, it did well for all of us. It was top 2 for all 3 of us.
That's my first place, your second place.
Yep, his second place too.
His second,
yeah. So the 15-year Tribute export is a little bit more based on tonight. I'm starting to feel like it's a little bit better than I remember it.
Oh no, it is. It's that's considered. I mean, those are expensive as crap right now.
No kidding. And they're easy to fake. That's the bad thing.
I know.
You can fill them
with that little cellophane, basic little shrink wrap. That's the tough part.
If anyone from Campari is listening, I will tell you this, and I've said it before on social media multiple times, putting plastic shrink wrap around the cork is not a way to protect your product.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all like Master's Keep, Single Rickhouse, Russell's 13, like they're all just plastic wrap around a cork.
Yeah.
Like anybody can buy an empty bottle off eBay, fill it up with 101 or Rare Breed or whatever, put a generic plastic wrap you get off of Amazon.
Yeah.
And done. You know, it's like, come on, just at least put like a holographic foil strip or some kind of tamper-proof thing that's harder to replicate by just going on Amazon and buying it. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I get it with Tribute and some of these were meant to be drunk. I mean, they weren't meant.
Back when they came out, right? There wasn't the big craze and the boom.
This was
and
for you to
and
open and enjoy.
Yeah.
This was not meant for you to trade around for $2,000.
Yeah.
So I get it, but we know better now. We know that whiskey is worth a lot of money on the secondary. Brands need to do better about protecting their product because the other side of the coin is somebody buys.
What about Buffalo Trace, bro?
Buffalo Trace. Somebody buys
with the actual NFC stuff.
I like that.
That's cool as can be.
Yeah, that is cool. But think about the other side of it is, you know, somebody buys a, I don't know, Single Rickhouse CNF because it's like many people have called it Whiskey of the Year for 2023, and I agree with that. The Single Rickhouse CNF is amazing.
I sent you double blinds.
Yeah.
And you still picked that as the freaking home run champ.
It was awesome.
I sent you double blinds on that.
It's an awesome whiskey.
Yeah.
But all it takes is someone to take an empty bottle, fill it up with Rare Breed, and put plastic wrap around it.
That's true, man.
They can sell it for whatever it is on the secondary now. I have no idea what it goes for.
It literally is just basic little plastic wrap.
It
is.
And we know better now. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be putting some kind of strip that makes it a little bit harder. Like at least with CGF, you had that like gold foil with the turkey on it.
You had to freaking tear and
Well, you would have to get someone to custom make that for you.
Yeah.
I don't have to custom make most of these things.
A cellophane.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, and same thing with wax. Anybody can dip wax. If you think wax is going to protect you, it's not. Anybody can dip wax. But they should be doing a little bit more to kind of protect the integrity of their product because, like I said, on the other side of it is somebody does pay $2,000 for Russell's 98. Let's say they pay Russell's Reserve 98, they pay $2,000, and they open it up and they get a Rare Breed experience. They're going to bitch about it. They're going to say, this doesn't taste anything at all like everybody was talking about. Why would somebody want to spend a lot of money on this? So if I were Campari or Wild Turkey, I would be thinking about the long term. Like, I want to protect the integrity of this acclaimed, award-winning product. And by doing that, I'm going to put this seal on it or something to keep these counterfeiters from making a buck off of it.
Because if that bottle gets in the hand of like an influencer,
you can go on eBay now and you can do a search, Russell's 2003, 2002, 98, whatever. You'll find empty bottles. It's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's really in the bourbon groups is looked down upon huge any kind of selling of an open bottle of an empty bottle. It's like in Japan, man. Like during that glut era, a lot of stuff was shipped over to Japan that helped keep all these guys afloat. Well, the actual Yakuza, the freaking mafia, the mob over there, they're big into counterfeiting.
Yeah.
So there's so much counterfeits coming back from Japan, man. You really don't know exactly what you're getting on those old dusties like that.
I mean, you have to do something to protect your product. And I feel like we're past that time, especially if they're going to price Master's Keep $275 at retail or Single Rickhouse at $300 at retail. Let's go ahead and give your consumers a little bit of protection there. Put some kind of quality control mechanism. It doesn't have to be RFID and the stuff that because
it's not even for the now, it's for 5 years from now.
Right.
7 years from now.
Right. If this is truly Whiskey of the Year, somebody's going to buy it and they want to open it 10 years from now. They're expecting a Whiskey of the Year product. And if they open it up and it tastes like Rare Breed, they're going to have a problem with that.
Well, David, thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, I loved it.
How can people reach out and get to know more about you?
They can go to rarebird101.com.
Okay.
Or you can check me out on social at rarebird101 on Instagram or rbird101 on X or what used to be known as Twitter.
Yeah.
The real name.
Yeah, the real name. And or you can go to patreon.com/rarebird101 if you want to support me and get like more in-depth interviews and reviews and things that I
Access
don't
to
normally do.
picks.
Yeah, access to picks, things I don't normally do on the blog.
And Kenny Mills is on some of the picks now. So
There you go.
you can get some good bottles in. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. You get some Kenny picks there. But so that's where you can find me. Or you can, if you go to Amazon, you can look up one of my books.
I was going to say, where the books
American Spirit, Wild Turkey Musings, both on Amazon or wildturkeybook.com. But thanks for having me, guys.
Man,
Really appreciate
great.
We appreciate you so much,
Retreat.
man.
It's a late night. It's what time is it? Oh, is it 1:07?
107, bro. It's late.
Damn.
Late.
Spent a day at Wild Turkey. Spent a day with Kenny.
There we go, man. I don't have to be to work till about 8:45 tomorrow, so we got another 7 hours to drink.
gosh.
We're good.
Oh, thank you, sir.
All right. Boom.
Cheers.
And with that, thanks for listening to this week's edition. Please like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Mashup KY.
Don't forget to visit our partner, bourbonoutfitter.com. Enter code The Mashup for a special discount.
Also,
Head on over to our partner, the Woodwork Collective, at woodworkcollective.shop. Enter code MASHUP for a 15% discount.
let us know your thoughts in the bottom of the comment section. Until next time, keep it neat.